Welcome to the September 2023 update on the performance of my solar array. I'm sorry this video is so late, it's getting worse and worse, but let's get into it. So this disclaimer, please pause and read. I'm not an expert, there might be some mistakes in what I say. Alright, let's get straight into the numbers. So over the lifetime of having solar power, I have now produced 12,410 kilowatt hours of solar power. Looking at 2023, I have produced this year 6,226 kilowatt hours. This time last year we had produced 5,420, therefore we have produced an additional 806 kilowatt hours, which is the equivalent of about 15%. So remember, we have 4 additional solar panels on the roof this year, facing almost a south direction. So we're getting a lot of benefit there. On the flip side, the summer hasn't been as sunny as it was the previous year, so we're a tiny bit down on generation compared to last year. Looking at electricity import, this year we have imported 4,056 kilowatt hours. This time last year we had imported just 1,287, so that's a whopping increase of 2,769 kilowatt hours, or 215%. Now the primary reason is the electric car. Last year we were barely using it and we had a lot of free credit to use up. This year we are using it a lot and we have no free credit. So we're pulling a lot of off-peak power from the grid to keep the car alive. In terms of gas import, this year we've imported 19,956 kilowatt hours. Same time last year we had imported 21,333, so we are down 1,377 kilowatt hours, or 6.5%. So that's pretty good, right? In terms of adjusting your gas consumption, it's pretty hard because your cooking stays the same in terms of gas consumption, pretty much, and the bulk of it is used to heat hot water and your central heating, and the amount of kilowatts that go into that, the amount of kilowatt hours that go into heating hot water and your central heating, if you save 5 kilowatts or 10 kilowatts here, it barely makes a difference. So to save a whopping 1,377 year to date, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So I don't know what we've done. It looks to me like the month of September was warmer this year compared to last, but other than that, I'm not sure. When I give you next month's update, I'll talk to you about some improvements we've been making during the month of October. So when we do the update for November, then we should have one clean month and we'll see what kind of difference we're starting to see. Alright, CapEx has stayed the same, no more investment into the system. The improvements I talk about, I'll have a think about whether I'm going to include them here or not, because it's not strictly related to our going green kind of situation. And finally, OPEX, over the lifetime of having the system, in the year of 2023, we have saved £4,373.04. Same time last year, we had managed to save just £1,968. Therefore, this year we have saved an additional 2,404. So that's an increase of 122%. So that's also pretty good, and a big portion of it is down to having the electric car. So we're not paying for diesel, and we're driving the car around for free or next to nothing. And in addition, we've got the second battery starting to really pay dividends here, because we can charge up enough to meet our daily demand on the off-peak. So we've slashed our electricity bill down to a quarter of what it would otherwise be. Okay, so moving on, let's look at the figures coming from Enphase. So here's the graph for the month of September. We produced 677.3 kilowatt hours. Of that, we exported 27.3. We had to import 418.8, which meant the house overall used 1.1 megawatt hours. Now, if you look carefully at the graph, you can see some whopping grey sections above the blue, and this is because we were doing a lot of driving and we were charging up the electric car overnight. So these massive segments you see here, where I'm pointing with my mouse, is overnight charge for the electric car. Otherwise, you can see more or less the sunshine kind of was doing pretty good at the beginning of September and starts to slow down towards the end. But on the most part, if you kind of eliminate the electric car charging, then the solar power was meeting the kind of standby demand for the house. So the metric is we were only dependent on the grid for 39% of our power. It would have been significantly less if we didn't have to charge the car. And then over on the right, you can see the contribution from each solar panel. So the ones facing southeast are getting about 37 kilowatts. The ones facing southwest are a fraction less with 35 kilowatts. And then the ones facing west-northwest are down on about 20 kilowatts. And then the couple which are affected by shading are really not doing a great deal. Okay, so that's the performance here. Moving on, let's look at the best and the worst days. So our best day was the 4th of September. We produced 36.2 kilowatt hours. And as you can see, we had enough charge in the battery from the night before, so we didn't pull anything overnight. It looks like it was a nice and sunny blue day with clear sky, so we had a nice curve over here. Around 3 p.m. we had managed to fill up our battery and we had topped up our hot water, so we managed to export about 1 kilowatt back to the grid. And then I'm still in the search of having the most perfect day without pulling anything from the grid, but it looks like over here around 7 p.m. We were drawing more than 3 kilowatts in the house at that moment. Probably the oven and something else was on, so we ended up pulling a tiny bit of power from the grid because the battery cannot discharge at more than 3 kilowatts. The worst day was the 20th of September. I don't know why I've written July. We only produced 7 kilowatt hours. You can see that we were charging the car overnight. The battery, I hadn't adapted the battery's configuration to charge up more overnight on the off-peak power, knowing that the days are getting shorter, the sunlight's diminishing, and we don't have enough solar power generation to kind of meet our demand. So on this day, I think the battery's set to kind of charge to about 20% or something overnight, and that just wasn't enough to meet the kind of this little bit of demand here in the morning, the kind of demand during the day, given that we were barely producing anything. So basically we got to about 6 p.m. and the battery had run out. And so from 6 p.m. through to midnight, we're pulling power from the grid, and the first portion here is all at peak rate. So I have adjusted the battery now towards, this is for September, but I've only just adjusted it in October to basically almost fully charge the battery, because we're just, as you guys can see, October has been miserable with the rain all the time. All right, moving on. Household electricity consumption. So on the far right, we're looking at the bar graph for September. Of the power that our house consumed, 487 kilowatt hours were provided by free sunshine. A tiny amount, there's blue sliver here, that has got to be like 10 or 15 kilowatts, that was provided by the grid because the battery was flat, for example, so the graph I just showed you. Looking at the red stuff, which is the car, so you've got a dark red section here, which is us charging the car at peak rate, I think, and you can see it's a tiny sliver, like 1 kilowatt, 2 kilowatts or something. The bulk of the car charging 319 kilowatts was at off-peak rate, and the light red section here was solar power, so that looks like it's about 100 kilowatts or maybe a fraction over. Going into the eddy, you can see that we had a little bit of off-peak going into the eddy here, maybe 20 kilowatts, and then we had a chunk over here, something like 50 kilowatts, which is from free solar power. We had a little bit of export, a tiny sliver again, so it looks like it was about 20, 25, 30 kilowatt hours, going back to the grid. Looking at the gas consumption, so the month of September was pretty good. It was reasonably warm, so the consumption was comparable to most of our summer months here, which is surprisingly good. So we had only turned on the heating system in the house during the month of October, so we've managed to run what looks like 4 months here with the heating switched off. So that's really, really good. Compared to last year, it was basically only 2 months, and the year before we managed to have it off for 3 months. So we're doing well. If I compare to 2 summers ago, we were averaging about 1,000 kilowatt hours of gas consumption. If I look at this year, we've gone from 550 to 623 to 809 to 767. So we're averaging about 700 kilowatt hours of gas consumption during these summer months. So that is a 30% reduction compared to 2 years ago. And if I look at the summer months of last year, we've got, for the same months, we've got 936, 588, 655, and 1819. So if you exclude the 1819 and we look at these three, the average of that is probably about 700. So our consumption this summer versus last summer is on par. So that's pretty good. Okay, so moving on, let's see what our Octopus Bid is. So they have charged me £31.78 for gas in the kind of smaller portion of our house. They've charged £41.42 for gas in the main portion of our house, and they've charged us £50.49 for electricity. And as you can see, we were doing an awful lot of driving, so there's a lot of charging going on off peak. And now that we're into September, there just isn't enough sunshine to service our household demand and leave enough to go into the car, which is like a bottomless pit. Okay, so if you're interested in switching to Octopus, they have some very good smart tariffs I would recommend, and they have just launched their Octopus Plus kind of scheme, which is their reward scheme for using less power at peak time, and they've also now included using more power when there's a surplus on the grid. So if you want to make money, then I would suggest considering switching to Octopus, and if you do so, then both you and I will receive £50 off our next bill, and the link that you can use to get that is in the description for the video. If you choose to call them up and kind of switch to them over the phone, then in the link, the last 3 words, just quote those 3 words from the link to them on the phone, and they will get you the £50. All right, looking at my energy. So here's the graph of power going into our hot water. As you can see, we don't have a great deal of surplus compared to the summer months. So there's a little trickle going in during the day. The light grey that you see earlier in the month is the kind of side portion of our house, and then the kind of greeny coloured bars that you see occasionally is the main portion of our house. If you recall in the previous video, I mentioned that gas has now become cheaper than off-peak electricity, so we're warming our hot water via gas rather than electricity, and a few folks commented that it's actually more energy efficient to use electricity rather than gas because we'll have losses in the system through the boiler or whatever. I agree with that comment. I think it's right, even though the units cost me more in terms of electricity. The point here is you'll likely use less electricity to heat your hot water than you would the equivalent amount of energy in gas. So I do agree with that point. However, I still haven't done anything with the system to kind of change it around and force it to heat from electricity. But I might consider doing that, say from the 1st of November, so we can have some clean data going forward. All right, installer estimates. So, this is my favorite chart. I keep on banging on about it. We are blowing the installer estimates out of the window, which means that having a solar power system and all the equipment that we've got is way more lucrative than they ever tell you. And those of you who do your own calculations should come to similar numbers to me and find that the payback period is significantly sooner than the installers tell you. So if we look at the month of September, as I said before, we have produced 12,410 kilowatt hours over the lifetime of having solar. By the end of year 2, which is officially end of October this year, we should have produced 9,832, when we've actually produced 12,410 already with 1 more month to go. So we're already at 126% of what the installers expected us to achieve, and so we might actually make it to about 130%. Just to keep the numbers clean, I've actually been using January to December for these metrics, but our system was installed, I think on the 8th of November. So I'm kind of counting those first 2 months for free because it's the winter, barely anything happens. But regardless, the point I'm making here is that we have produced, maybe by the end of year 2, 30% more than the installer said. Right? So if you're producing more, you're using more probably, or you're selling it back to the grid more. So whichever one you're doing, you are saving more money by 30% than they predicted. Over on the right hand side, consumption versus the estimate is also an important number. So by the end of year 2, the installer estimated we would have used 4,916 kilowatt hours of the 9,832 that they predicted that we would produce, which is exactly 50%. However, we have now consumed 11,422 kilowatt hours of everything we've produced, which is 232% of what they estimated. So exactly as I just said, if you're producing more, you're then able to use more. And if you're using more free power, you're buying less power. Therefore, you're saving money quicker. And that means the payback of your entire system is accomplished quicker. So, in the month of September, we managed to consume 95% of everything we produced. So the aim of the game in this graph is to try and get the green to be as big as possible and the blue slivers to be as small as possible. The blue is what you're giving away back to the grid, which is the least lucrative way of having this system. Okay, so we have done a reasonably good job in the month of September. It's kind of on par with some of our best months looking back over here. So this is good news. All right. Now let's get into the big table of numbers. So we're on the right hand side looking at the month of September. So our system produced 677 kilowatt hours. Of that, we exported 31 kilowatt hours. That means we actually used 646.3 of all of this free power. From the 646, we put 486.91 into servicing the base load of our house. We put 58.9 into the eddy, and we put just over 100 kilowatt hours into getting our car to run for free. We imported 371 kilowatt hours of electricity from the grid, and we imported 767 kilowatt hours of gas from the grid. As I said, capex has remained the same. The unit rates have stayed the same. The mystery still remains on our export. But as I keep saying, Octopus have now become more lucrative than Scottish Power for the SEG tariff. So I just need to get round to calling them to see if I can switch back, because I really don't like the Scottish Power way of working. We have no clue what's going on. The problem is Octopus are a Monday to Friday kind of people, and during that time I'm just too busy to get on the phone to them and do the switch. They all of these energy providers still operate in the dark ages when it comes to organising your export tariffs. You have to kind of call them up, chase them down. It takes forever. You know, they're not regulated in the same way as the import, where they have to do everything and make it happen within 72 hours. Okay, turning these numbers into monetary figures. So we have saved £151 worth of electricity by diverting this solar power into meeting our household demand. We save £9.30 by being able to charge up our battery overnight, so we get cheap electricity. We save £4.36 by using the eddy to heat our hot water using solar power. It's cost us 3p on Octopus Go by pumping a bit of energy into the eddy. So this is where the cost of electricity is off-peak electricity is a fraction higher than the cost of gas. So you're looking at this 7.4p versus this 7.5p, and because of that, it's cost us 3p. That's what it looks like on paper, but as some of you have already commented, the efficiencies in the system will most likely offset that and will actually have a benefit. But I have no way of measuring that, so it's not included here. The export numbers here are based on the Octopus numbers, but we know that's wrong, so I continue to highlight them until I receive a bill showing me the correct numbers, and then I'll fix all of this. Solar savings: by using solar power to charge the car, we saved £7.44. We did not import any peak time electricity from the grid in September. We spent £23.91 buying electricity off peak, and we spent £12.72 buying electricity from a public charging point. We would have otherwise spent £393 on diesel for all of the driving that we did. We did approximately 1,400 miles or 1,500 miles, something like that, in the month of September. It's quite a lot. So that's the equivalent of almost £400 of diesel. So when you net all of that out, we have basically saved £364.50 by having an electric car, because it's only cost us in total £30 worth of electricity to do the 1,400 miles of driving. So the grand total for the month of September is that we saved £530.48. So our cumulative savings are now £7,186. If we subtract that from our capex balance, that leaves £16,305 until we break even. That means we have now paid off 30%, just 30.6% of our entire investment. And on a linear basis, that means we will reach break even in 6 years and 2 months. And for the month of September, overall, on average, we were energy independent by 64%. 64% of our energy was provided by solar power, and the rest we were putting from the grid. So this is really good news. I'm personally still surprised that we're managing to chop off a couple of months each time from our forecasted payback. But kind of looking and understanding the numbers, it does make sense, right? A big factor here is that the cost of diesel is starting to creep up again. In the month of September, at my local station, it was like £1.60. At the moment, it's pushing to £1.70. And so with the cost of fuel rising and the cost of electricity slowly becoming cheaper, the difference between the two numbers becomes your saving. So it's helping to make this bigger and bigger. Plus, we're doing a lot of driving, so we get a lot of efficiency by using the car. So for those of you kind of trying to figure this all out, if you have solar power, that's fantastic. During the daytime, you will get a bit of free electricity. However, in the winter months, it doesn't produce enough. In the summer months, it's producing so much that you can't use it all up when it's being produced. So if you just get solar panels, then it is likely it will take 18 to 20 years before you break even. However, if you add other things into the equation, you can chop massive amounts off that forecast. So if you add a battery, it now means you're able to do two things. One, you can store the free solar power that you're generating during the day so that you can use it in the evening when there isn't any sunshine, but you're using electricity. So that now makes your evening electricity consumption free. The second thing you can do with the battery is you can get onto a smart tariff like I've got, and it means that your overnight rate of electricity is cheaper. So you can configure the battery to charge up overnight on the cheap rate, and then during the day, when you would otherwise have to pay an expensive rate, the battery can be discharging the power, and therefore you've effectively quartered your electricity bill. Right? If you look at the numbers that I've got here on the screen, the cost of off-peak electricity is about a quarter of peak time electricity. So if you have a battery, just charge it up overnight on the off-peak rate, pay this to the grid, and then during the day when you would have to pay 31p, you're paying nothing to them. So simple maths, you've quartered your bill just like that. So that's the benefit of adding a battery into the equation. If you still are generating more power, then again you can do a similar thing with the eddy. You can buy an eddy to heat your hot water. This only works if you have a tank to store your hot water. If you have a combi boiler, this can't work in your setup. But you can get an eddy to put solar power in to heat your hot water. And even if you don't have solar panels, similar to the battery, you can get the eddy anyway, and you can configure it to heat your hot water overnight on the off-peak rate. But if that's all you're doing, just heating your hot water overnight on the off-peak rate, you don't need to buy the eddy. You can just get some sort of timer, smart timer for your immersion heater, and configure it to turn on overnight. buying a smart timer or something, or like the Tesla, not the car brand, there's another brand called Tesla, which does smart immersion heaters. For example, if you got that one, it's about £80, and you can configure that thing on a program from an app to heat your hot water overnight. So you can get the same features that I'm getting from the Eddy, but you can get it a lot cheaper if the only thing you're doing is using grid electricity to heat your hot water. So that's another way where you can save money. Remember that although the cost of gas in my example is cheaper than the cost of off-peak electricity, as many of you have mentioned, the losses in the system, when you burn gas, you lose a lot of the gas to kind of noise and heat dissipating in the pipe before it gets to your hot water cylinder. It therefore becomes cheaper to use electricity. That's the point that some folks have made, because you don't have anywhere near the same amount of losses with the electricity, with the immersion heater. Okay, so that's the second kind of way of benefiting from all of this equipment. And the third one then is if you have an electric car. This is the big one. At least in the UK, there's no amount of sunshine which is going to meet the demand of how much power an electric car needs if you use it as your daily run around. So that means any surplus sunshine can be put into your car. And again, if you get on the smart tariff, you can charge your car for a quarter of the price overnight, which is better than paying peak time price. And even if you don't have solar panels, you can get on to the smart tariff, which lets you charge your car at a quarter of the price overnight. So you can see that what I'm saying is solar panels are great because you can get completely free power. But if the maths don't add up for you, or you don't have a property where the roof is facing in the right direction, or you're not able to put solar panels on your roof, there's still three components of my equation which you can benefit from without even having solar panels, right? You can get the battery, you can get the like a smart immersion heater, and if you have an electric car, you can charge all of that at a quarter of the price simply by getting a smart tariff. Okay, so there's lots of ways you can save money and accomplish a good portion of the savings that you see that I'm making here. All right, finally, the payback curve. So as I keep saying, the aim of the game is to get this green line here to catch up with this blue line up here. And you saw from the previous slide, we have paid back about 30% of our system. So that means this green line is about 30% of the way there to catch up with the blue line. So we are approaching the 2-year mark and we've hit 30%. So let's assume that next month we'll have hit 33%. So we've paid off exactly a third. That validates that the payback is going to be 6 years. 6 years, right? And my installer told me 18 years. So that's a pretty good return. That's a pretty good return for us. So something you guys should strongly consider. And you can see all the other lines that I've got here represent the savings that we're pulling from all the different kind of components in the equation. Okay, well, I'm sorry the video is late. That's it for this month. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave some comments. If you're interested in me deep diving into a particular component in the system and explaining how it works and showing you the app, please leave a comment and I will try my best to make a video along those lines. You can see on the on this kind of credit slide all the different brands that form part of my equation. So with the exception of the solar panels, Trina and Jinko, there's not much I can tell you about that. I am able to elaborate on the rest of them if that's something you're interested in. So just please leave a comment and we'll catch you in the next video.